Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Ziona here, back again with another Warcraft Rumble PvP-oriented video. It's been a day or two since I've done one. I needed to take a little breather to level up my decks here because I'm slowly falling out of viability here, doing so many deck lists, upgrading all these cards. But today we're going to be going over specific minis and the talents. Sorry, specific minis and the talents associated with those minis that you're going to want to get when you're first starting your account in particular, and those minis to focus on. I'm not going to go over every mini in this video because we would be sitting here for hours and hours and hours. So I'm going to play a little bit of some background gameplay here for you. Probably chuck on some, I don't know, Baron control or something, because today we're going to be going over the Undead Faction. We're going to do it faction specific because it's gonna save you having to sit through hours and hours of me blabbing. But we're going to go over the minis, and we're going to determine what ones you're going to want to build if you are building some from the Undead Faction, and the ones you kind of want to avoid for cards that are relatively just not as good as alternative cards in other factions and stuff like that. So I guess we'll go alphabetically here, and we're going to start talking about the cards. I know in the comments lately, a lot of you guys have been asking about talents to take on your minis, what minis to, spend that gold on, because gold is a very valuable resource in this game. You don't want to be leveling up cards that are going to end up being useless. So this is my opinion on what you guys should be focusing on, what you guys should be building in the Undead Faction if you're going to pick up some of those cards. So alphabetically here, let's start it off with the Abomination. The Abomination is a big beefy boy with a hook. He's got that physical AoE cleave damage for ground units. He's got exceptionally high health. I think he has the highest base health in the game aside from the Golem in the Blackrock faction. But he has that awesome ability where he hooks ground-based ranged targets in to help you really take care of those pesky majors or Huntress even. He pulls in Huntress, all those scary cards. He yoinks them in. This card is spectacular, and you'll see me running it quite often. He has that level 1 base health of almost 3,000 and some relatively reasonable DPS. So great card. The talents that you want to take on Abomination is called Noxious Presence. That is probably the best talent that he has available. It gives him an AoE poison every 3 seconds to ground enemies, but around him every 3 seconds. And since he's so hard to kill, you're going to be constantly poisoning all those enemies that are on top of you, and just adding to his DPS slowly. Not only his DPS, but it's going to kill off swarm targets. Like, he can't be murdered by chickens, so it removes a counter from him. And Noxious Presence is the one that you're going to want to take. There's another option in Fresh Meat. It's called Fresh Meat, where after you use your hook, you do a shoot ton of extra damage. If you want your Abomination to be a DPS threat, this is an option. I wouldn't recommend it, but, in decks like Tyrion 1 push, where the units are so busy healing that they're not doing any damage, you'll find a lot of the time without your Flame Waker or something behind that you're not doing a lot of damage, just a ton of healing. So if you want to make him more of a DPS threat, you're not so worried about those swarm cards, in decks like Tyrion, taking Fresh Meat is a good option. Some of the decks that Abomination runs in is like any deck that needs a frontline meat shield, to be honest. There's a ton of decks that make use out of this card. Tyrion obviously being one. You can do it on Murk-Eye Swarm, albeit I still prefer that Lava Golem boy from Blackrock faction. He's great in Grand Bruiser decks. That's where you would probably also take Fresh Meat, but I still prefer Noxious Presence. I think it's the best talent for him. And then you have him in Thalnos Control, where he's 100% necessary to get rid of threats to your Thalnos. So he's used in a lot of decks. Overall, fantastic card. Quickly jumping on to the next one here. Alphabetically, we have Banshee. Banshee is a card that targets the first target she comes into contact with. She kind of like charges at it. And she takes that card and it becomes your card. This is huge. But getting her onto priority targets can be tough at times because people can put garbage in front of that, in front of that tank, so that she takes over like a Drake egg or something stupid. So she is kind of hard to play, and she's pretty specific to certain decks. She's very easily killable. But she plays really good with Smoke Bomb. You can Smoke Bomb her to get her in on targets. That's what I like to do. The talents that you want to take on Banshee is called Will of the Necropolis. When you take your target, it fully heals that target. So it allows you full use of the card that you took for 4, assuming that you took a good card, which is what you want. This is like, so you don't have to worry about if your cards have half health, a golem or something. You're going to full health that bad boy, and then it's yours for 4, it's a great card. My only issue with the card is it's pretty specific in the decks that it plays in, but we'll get to that. Another option that you could take, aside from Will of Necropolis, is called Soul Eruption. It causes the target that you took over to explode. It's good in control decks because, especially if you lack defense, you can kill off a bunch of cards with that explosion, but it's not nearly as good as Will of Necropolis. That's the one you should be aiming for and the one you want. Don't take Bloodlust. I know it sounds cool, like 10 seconds of Bloodlust, that it's going to do a bunch of damage, but for the most part, for Banshee, you're going to be stealing things like tanks that just don't have a lot of DPS to begin with. And really, it's probably the weakest of all of them. Because, 90% of your Banshee's running in control decks. Speaking on the decks that it does run in, you've got Thalnos Control, you've got Baron Control, and then you've got Tyrion Push decks. It's good for stealing cards. It's good on Tyrion because you're stealing the card and then you're self-healing it as well. And it just becomes, it joins in on your unstoppable push. And that's Banshee down. Great card overall. Not bad to get, but I wouldn't say it'll be your priority to level. At the end of the video, I'll jump into what you should level and what you should avoid for your guys' reference. Next up in line, we've got Cheat Death. Cheat Death just prevents your minions from dying. For 3, it only costs 3 elixir, and it's got like a base duration of 5 seconds. It's another, like Banshee, but even more nuanced and specific card. It's only played in, like, realistically 1 deck, and that maybe 2 decks. And that is Thalnos Control, where you're just going to jump to decks first because it's a spell. That's Thalnos Control it's used in to keep Thalnos alive, but I don't even run it personally. I think it's not necessary. Not to say it's a bad card. And then it'll also run in Jaina Control, not Jaina Spell Cycle, but Jaina Control. 2 control decks. The talent that you want to take on this card is called Vampirism. It's the only real option for Cheat Death that's any good, in my opinion, or like real solid. The rest of them are kind of mediocre. It's going to allow the unit to heal based on the damage it does, and that's just going to further prevent that card from dying. It's really good if you want to keep Thalnos alive because you're going to have him like level 20 and almost dead. You Cheat Death him, and then he's going to heal so much because he's doing so much damage that he'll be at a pretty reasonable health in no time, along the fact that you do take Holy Nova in that deck. But that's Cheat Death, a very, very specific card, not used very often, but that's that one out of the way. We're going to jump into the next one here. One of my favorite cards, Gargoyle. Gargoyle is a 4-drop armored unit. It flies. It's crazy tanky because it is armored. It's got like 1,300 base health or something. Something crazy. But one of its negatives is it ignores units. It just goes straight for towers, which isn't inherently bad, but if you're using them as a tank, it's not great. But it is good in certain decks, and we'll get to those. It's about half as tanky as the Abomination for 4-drop, so it's a little more, but it does crazy, crazy tower damage. It has like triple Abomination's DPS to towers specifically. Great card. The talents that you want to take for this card is Wing Buffet is probably the best for the decks that he's in. I wouldn't say it's the best talent, but for the decks that he plays in, most notably, I would say Wing Buffet is the best. Decks like Sneedface, Blackhand Flying, and stuff. But you have another talent in Aerial Superiority, which is a good alternative, which makes him tankier to flying units. So if you're using him more as a quasi-tank, and not in some of these face decks and stuff, Aerial Superiority is completely fine. If that's all you got, use it. No worries. Great, great, great talent as well. The decks that Gargoyle often finds himself playing in will be Blackhand Flying. It is probably one of the most prevalent cards in that deck, and it's 100% necessary for that deck. It makes it crazy, crazy strong. He's your tank in front of all your other flying units. He gets cheaper. Great deck. I mean, S tier if you watched my tier ranking. But it runs Gargoyle in it. It is a huge part of that deck. It's necessary. And then it runs in Sneedface or Sneed All-In decks sometimes. I personally don't like it in Sneed decks because it is not a siege unit, but it does help you take out those pesky towers on harder opponents. But it's not gonna get you that bonus gold, so that's one negative about it in a Sneed deck. And then we've got him in Thalnos Control, which is it's a fantastic card in Thalnos Control as that frontline tank, where you would probably run Aerial Superiority with the Thalnos deck. But I still prefer Abomination for the Thalnos Control, but it is an option if you don't have Abomination, for example. Let's keep going. We've got a big list. I think there's like 12 minis in this faction alone. That's why I didn't want to do it all in one video, because like I couldn't imagine how long that video would be. But this was a nice way to help players out. And we'll just do it piecemeal, faction by faction, and then we'll get to heroes probably last and their talents. I'll try and put all these videos out quickly so that you're not waiting around for your faction that you want. Next up on the list, sorry, I'm yammering. I haven't had enough Red Bull. Let's get another one. Let's get another one going, boys. Can never have enough Red Bull, I'm telling you. All right, on with the spiel. Next up is GHOUL. GHOUL is a freaking awesome card. Awesome, awesome, awesome card. He is crazy tanky for a 2-drop. Not tanky, but he has a lot of health. For something that costs 2, he makes like Quillbore look like garbage. This card is fantastic. He self-heals himself when he kills something, which is huge. It's like a self-healing tank, which is just... It's just an all-around amazing card. Probably one of the best that Undead has to offer, aside from, like, maybe Abomination or something. But this is a good card. Super versatile. The talents that you want to take on him, he's even got good talents. He's got 2 fantastic options. One in Bone Shield, which gives him armored for 10 seconds after he cannibalizes something, making him inherently more tanky as a 2-drop, which is just crazy. Or, if you're like me and you prefer the aggressive 2-drop, because I use them in cycles a lot of the time, is Taste for Blood. Taste for Blood is just a flat DPS increase to enemies below half health. It's just extra damage. Both are fantastic options. Don't be sad if you have either of them. Use it. Absolutely spectacular. The decks that GHOUL likes to run in, because he is super versatile, he can fit into almost any deck. Like, realistically, he can be used in almost any deck. But most notably, you're going to see him in Thalanos and Baron control decks. You're going to see him in Baron Swarm. You're going to see him in Grom Bloodlust. You can see him in some Tyrion mid-range decks, but that's quite uncommon. And he's really good in Hogger Cycle. Like, just a great card. Got uses all over the game. I'm going to spoil it. Obviously, this is one of those cards you're going to want to put levels into because he has so many uses. You're not going to regret having this card leveled up and powered up and, turned uncommon, rare, or whatever it is. Because you are going to have a lot of use out of this card. Fantastic card. On the opposite hand, we've got Mr. Meatwagon up next. Not a bad card. It's just extremely niche. Doesn't have a ton of uses. It's a ranged AoE card. Outranges towers because it's a tower burster. It is a siege card, and it targets ground units only, no flying. Considering it's a catapult, you'd think it could hit things in the air, but somehow this catapult does not hit things in the air. The talent that you want to take on this card is Greased Gears. It gives you Fury, which increases the attack speed of it as it attacks. Think that little Blackrock Firehammer chick. Similar to that. It's just going to give you a flat DPS increase. That's all it really does. It doesn't change the way the card works. But it's a good option, and your only real solid option. The rest are kind of trash, in my opinion. The decks that you'll see Meatwagon in is basically just Baron Swarm and some one-off Sneed decks. I don't like it in Sneed. I can see why people take it. It's just not for me. I think there's better options. But that's Meatwagon out of the way. Next up, we have a top-tier card in Necromancer. This card is a 4-drop. It is crazy difficult to get rid of. The fact that it spawns its skeletons the moment those skeletons die makes actually getting to the Necromancer quite hard for a lot of decks. For a 4-cost caster, he's got a pretty high amount of health. I think his base health is like 300. So he's actually pretty tanky. Think Ogre Mage almost, for a 4-drop caster that spawns these stupid, annoying little skeletons. He's got great health, and his damage is also really good. But he's single target. For a mage, he's single target, and he does that elemental damage. But good card. Good. Having a stroke. Too much Red Bull. The talents you want to take on Necromancer is Breath of the Dying is probably the best. It's for taking positive trades with the skeletons that he spawns when he dies. He spawns like 5 skeletons. And normally they get first hit on the thing that just attacked the Necro because they're on attack cooldown, if that makes sense. And it's great for trading into lane and trading evenly or even trading positively. That's probably my favorite talent for him. I don't have it, but it is very good. I've played against it a lot. The one I do have, and the one that I would say is a viable choice for a second option, is called Jeweled Skulls. Jeweled Skulls turns his skeletons into mages. The mages slow, make them attack a little bit slower. It's really good for control decks. But it is just simply not as good as Breath of Dying, but it is an acceptable alternative, especially if you're playing a control deck. Some of the decks that he plays in is almost any deck that needs a single target mage, to be honest. Any single target DPS, you'll see him as a viable option, in my opinion. He's kind of like the Jaina of... the expensive, cooler Jaina of the Undead Faction. But most notably, you're going to see him in Baron Control, Baron Swarm, any of those variations of Baron decks. He's in almost every single Baron deck, reasonably. You're going to see him in Murk-Eye Swarm. Murk-Eye plays him for weak side lane. In the lane he's not running his Giant or A-Bomb or whatever in. You'll see him in Grom Bloodlust, because bloodlusting those little skeletons he spawns is actually hilariously strong. Dracasath Elemental, he's really good if they don't take the Flame Waker, which in my opinion is better, but I've seen some Dracasaths running Necromancer. It's quite good. And, I mean, I guess sometimes even in Tyrion decks, because you can just keep him alive and he keeps spawning those skeletons, but I mean, meh, I'm not big on him in Tyrion decks. There's so many better options. But all around you can see, like, this card is in a lot of decks. Really, really versatile again. Kind of like GHOUL. And certainly a good one. We're going to get into the next one here. And another bad one, in my opinion, and that is Plague Farmer. He's cheap. He costs 2. You know, he does that ground splash poison stuff, and he's got crazy, crazy, crazy high DPS, but he's made it of paper towel. But in my opinion, he's basically Bat Rider from Horde Faction, but just worse, because he doesn't fly. He might do a little bit more damage than Bat Rider, I'm pretty sure he does, but it's insignificant, and it's just Bat Rider's so much harder to get rid of than a 2-drop, you know, ground unit that dies to Chain Lightning. So, but yeah, the talent that you want to take on him is called Virulence. It's the only talent that you really want on him. It spreads poison to other targets when you kill something with his poison, which is, I mean, there's a good chance of that because he is probably going to be one of the higher DPSing cards in your deck. Splashing Pumpkins is okay-ish, I guess, like if you really wanted that. I'm not going to get too much into it. The decks that you'll see Plague Farmer, if at all, in is Hogger Cycle. You'll see maybe in Jaina Spell Cycle, you'll see something like that. Some Dracasath Elemental for Ground Splash, similar to like a cheaper Void Waker. I do not mind it actually in Dracasath Elemental. I think that's probably the one deck he's okay in. And then you'll see him, I guess, in Baron Swarm. Yeah, Baron Swarm, anything like that. Maybe even Baron Cycle, but just take the Bat Rider. Like, sorry, Plague Farmer. Great card. You're actually pretty good, but Bat Rider, just because she's flying, is gonna take the cake on that one. And her talents are notably a lot better as well. So we're getting there, guys. We've got two more cards, I believe. It's getting long, I know. Hang in there with me. I hope you're enjoying some of that Baron Rivendare gameplay. Probably Baron Control, because that's the only one I like to play. Figure I'll probably play some undead-oriented decks in the background. But if it's just random crap, I'm recording this before I play, so sorry in advance. Next up on the list is Skeleton Party. Skeleton Party, in my opinion, is way too expensive. It costs 4, but it's a pretty relatively solid unbound unit, and it can be used in some like pretty sneaky ways. It's not a bad card, honestly. I just feel it is good, but it is too expensive and too easily dealt with. You don't want it to die to like a really solid Holy Nova or Chain Lightning or something. When it's costing you 4, it's too easy to take negative trades with this card. But there is some specific uses for him. But first we're going to get into the talents that you want to take on this card. The talent is called 5-Man. It basically puts all the other talents that this card has to absolute shame. Like, this is the talent that you want. The rest of them, just forget they even exist. Aim for 5-Man if you're playing this card. Just simply due to the tank and the priest skeleton. But basically it spawns a tank, a priest, a rogue, and 2 mage skeletons. Almost like a 5-man World of Warcraft dungeon party. But that the tank and the priest make it worth it because you just can't as easily kill the skeleton party. But it being unbound makes this card almost worth that 4 mana, in my opinion. It's not that bad if you do like it. Some of the decks that you'll see Skeleton Party in, Baron Swarm, and obviously it's going to be played in Maiev Unbound. It's quite good in Maiev Unbound, for considering that deck is hot garbage. in my opinion. I do not like Unbound. I do not like that deck. I just don't think it's good. But if you're playing Maiev Unbound, because you're one of those guys, Skeleton Party is not bad in there. You might also see Skeleton Party in Grom Bloodlust decks, ironically. But in my opinion, the normal skeletons are better. But you can do it with the more expensive Skeleton Party. It is hilarious in Grom Bloodlust decks because you just get aggro the tower from, you know, your beefy bruiser cards with Bloodlust, and then you sneak them onto the tower with Unbound, and they do a crazy, crazy amount of damage. Really good for stealing towers and stuff. But that's Skeleton Party out of the way. And now we are on to the very, very last one. Regular skeletons. They're cheap as hell. I believe they cost 2. They're an Unbound unit. And it has a ton of uses. This card has a ton of uses. And it's got really, really good gold value. 2 drop for 3 skeletons that do good damage. As long as they're leveled equally with your opponent's base, like their base tower level, it won't die in one hit to the rocket ones. It's pretty good. Skeletons are great. The talents that you want for skeletons is Exhume. Exhume is probably the best option for Unbound decks, because when you play it near a tower, it's going to spawn you 2 extra skeletons, giving you more of that nonsense damage to enemy bases and towers, or if you're going straight face. You're going to take Exhume if you are running any of those Unbound decks. But I would personally recommend the one called Questing Buddies for Swarm and Cycle decks, because, you know, you get those good unit traits. That's the one I would take for Swarm and Cycle decks. Some of the decks that Skeletons fits into is Maiev Unbound. Fantastic in Maiev Unbound, even though the deck sucks, but the card fits it perfectly. You're going to see it in Murk-Eye Swarm religiously. Almost every single Murk-Eye Swarm deck plays Skeletons, reasonably so. They're just a great card. Good for killing an enemy miner, good for getting your chest, good for getting enemy chest, you name it. You're going to see it in Grom Bloodlust, kind of like Skeleton Party, but it's, in my opinion, way better. Fantastic card in Grom decks. You can see them in Baron, Swarm, and Control decks, Hogger Cycle, you name it. You can even sometimes see them in Black Hand decks to get rid of Rangers and Mages. But most people are taking Worgen for that. Worgen is just, he's 1 cost more, he's tankier, he does more damage. That's kind of what people like to run in the Black Hand deck for those problematic cards. But, you know, Skeletons is in there. So that's all of the units, guys. That's all of them. We finally got through it. Thanks for sticking around so long. You know, overall, Undead is a pretty top-tier faction in terms of the minis that it has. It's got some pretty powerful and really versatile cards. If you're gonna invest gold on the grid to upgrade any of these cards to like above common and stuff like that, and you're gonna spend your really important gold on any of these cards, I would 100% focus on Abomination, Ghoul. Ghoul is another good option. Necromancer and Gargoyle. Those 4 cards are probably the best and most versatile in the Undead faction. You're not going to regret spending your gold on them because they're used in a ton of decks, and they've got great talents. All around, those 4 cards are probably the ones you want to focus on. Again, that's Abomination, Ghoul, Necromancer, Gargoyle. The ones that you kind of want to avoid spending your gold on because they're like stuck to one deck or they got really strange uses or stuff like that is Meat Wagon. You're not going to want to spend your gold on Meat Wagon unless you're obsessed with the deck that it plays in. Cheat Death is another one you want to kind of avoid putting your gold into, and Plague Farmer. Just because as good as Plague Farmer is, it is a good card. that Horde Flyer is just notably better. But that's it, guys. That's everything for the Undead Faction. You know, stay tuned. Look forward to not only hero talents and stuff like that, but you know, look forward to the other factions that are coming up. And I'm gonna discuss the minis and the talents you should take on other factions. I'll try and get those out real quick for you guys. This is a lot of work, so I am trying to get them out fast, but you know, bear with me. I'll put them out as soon as I can, I promise you. Once again, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this was informative. I hope this helps you out, and I hope this helps you determine what minis you want, what you're going to spend your gold on so you're not wasting it, and stuff like that. But that's Undead out of the way, guys. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and keep on rumbling.
Time's running out.
Money, money, money.
10 seconds left.